Good Garvey Day. Happy Kwanzaa Day 1. Umoja. Peace and Black Power to the entire global Pan-African family. Shout out to my brothers and sisters on the mother continent, the kingdom of African people, the continent of Africa. Shout out to West Africa. Shout out to South Africa. Shout out to East Africa. Shout out to the Africans in North Africa, Central Africa, Southeast Africa. Africa is home. Africa is the kingdom. Africa is the government. Peace and Black Power to our brothers and sisters on the European continent. Shout out to Black France, our largest African population in Europe, Black France. Shout out to England. Shout out to the brothers and sisters in Ireland holding it down. Brothers and sisters in Austria holding it down. Brothers and sisters in Germany holding it down. Shout out to our Caribbean African family, Jamaica, Haiti, the Africans of Cuba, of Puerto Rico, okay, of the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, all the islands in the Caribbean, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, St. Croix, St. Thomas. Shout out to all the Caribbean Africans. Shout out to the Central and South American Africans, Brazil, Ecuador, all over the place. African Colombia, the Africans of Mexico. Shout out to the indigenous Africans of Mexico who came over tens of thousands of years ago from the great continent. Shout out to our Australian Africans, our Canadian Africans, and of course right here in the United Snakes of America. Shout out to the Africans of New York, DC, New York, Florida, Texas, Milwaukee, Des Moines, Phoenix, LA, Oakland, San Fran, Charleston, Charlotte, Winston-Salem, Raleigh, Durham, Baltimore, DC, Eastern Shore, Memphis, Chattanooga, Nashville, Little Rock, Jackson, Mississippi, New Orleans, Shreveport, Seattle, Portland, all the Pan-Africanists around the world. This is the first year in 20 years since I graduated from Millersville University with my very first master's degree in school psychology. This is the first year in 20 years that I will not be publicly speaking during Kwanzaa. I have spoken every single Kwanzaa for the past 19 years. The 10 years before y'all knew me, and the 9 years since y'all knew me, and this being the 10th year where I will not be speaking. So this is new for me. I'm used to packing up the suitcase, shipping out the books and the t-shirts and the hoodies, flying into Atlanta, flying into Houston, flying into LA, okay, driving down to DC, up to New York, over to New Jersey, Newark, Trenton, Camden, Jersey City. This is the first Kwanzaa in 20 years since I graduated from Millersville University that I will not be speaking publicly. So this is different. I don't know if I'm going to do a seminar all 7 days. I don't know if I'm going to do a seminar all 7 days, but I will do my best. Before I get started with today's most important seminar, I want to let everybody know that I will be starting off the new year in upstate New York. DR.UMAR will be starting off the new year in upstate New York, brothers and sisters. And on Saturday, January the 2nd, I will be having New York upstate book release in Rochester, Frederick Douglass City. We are starting the new year in Frederick Douglass City, where the great ancestor is resting with his wife and daughter, Queen Mother Anna Murray Douglass, and their daughter, Annie Douglass. And so I will be in Frederick Douglass City, starting the new year off with my great ancestor. And we will be in Rochester from 2 o'clock until 8 o'clock at Allah's Kitchen, owned by the good brother Knowledge, who represents the nation of God and earth's the 5% nation, the brother invited me in to Allah's kitchen, the kitchen of the Lord, where we serve the Lord's food, brothers and sisters. Rochester, New York, upstate New York, come through Saturday, January the 2nd. Rochester, New York, Allah's kitchen, 24 Hinchy Road, 24 Hinchy Road, Saturday, January the 2nd, Frederick Douglass City, Rochester, New York. It's only right that I start off the new year in the city for whom our esteemed institution is named, the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. I need to start off right, visiting the grave of the big homie, visiting the grave of the greatest black leader to ever walk on American soil and the undisputed greatest black leader of the 19th century. If you can't make it to Rochester 1 week from today, if you can't make it to Rochester 1 week from today, I will see you in Buffalo, New York. I will see you in Buffalo, New York the very next day, Sunday, January the 3rd, in Buffalo, New York, at the Alfonso Rafi Green Jr. Center, 1423 Fillmore Avenue in Buffalo, New York, Sunday, January the 3rd. Buffalo, New York is infamous in the history of Pan-Africanism because it was in Buffalo, New York that two very important conferences took place. In 1843, Frederick Douglass debated the great Henry Highland Garnet, grandfather of Pan-Africanism, on whether or not we should fight politically for an end to slavery or arm our brothers and sisters so that they can fight physically for the end to slavery. And so that took place in Buffalo, New York in 1843. Also in 1850, on my birthday, August the 21st. Okay, 19 years after the Nat Turner War, which also took place on August the 21st in Buffalo, New York, there was a fugitive slave law convention where abolitionists, black and white, came together in Buffalo, New York to strategize how they could destroy the new law that allows slave trackers to go into free states and snatch our ancestors back down into bondage. So Rochester and Buffalo are along what I call the Underground Railroad Trail. Along the Underground Railroad Trail, you know that Queen Mother Harriet Tubman is buried in Auburn, New York, which is only an hour from Rochester. So whenever I go up that way, I always try to visit the grave of the great Frederick Douglass, and I always try to visit the grave of the great Queen Mother Harriet Tubman. So Rochester, New York, Saturday, 1 week from the day, January 2nd, Allah's Kitchen, 2 to 8. Buffalo, New York, the very next day, Sunday, January the 3rd, 2 to 8, at the Alfonso Rafi Green Jr. Center on Fillmore Ave. If you need the flyer, you can text me, 215-989-9858. If you need the flyer, you can text me, 215-989-9858. And then 2 weeks later, we will be in Charleston, South Carolina. 2 weeks later, we will be in Charleston, South Carolina on Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. On Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, Friday, January the 15th. I will be in Charleston, South Carolina for the first time since 2015, when myself and many others, including the great Hashim Nzinga, past leader of the New Black Panther Party, who recently joined the ancestors. Condolences to his family, rest in paradise to Hashim, when we marched in solidarity against Dylan Roof and what he did by killing 5 or 6 mothers and brothers, a total of 9 Africans he assassinated inside of Denmark Vesey's church in Charleston, South Carolina. That was the last time I was in Charleston, the summer of 2015, when we protested. I had just spoken in Charleston a week prior. I left Charleston the morning of or the morning after the tragedy of the Emanuel 9. So this is my first time coming back since then. I want to see you all in Goose Creek at the Diamonds Cut Barber Lounge. Friday, January the 15th. In Goose Creek at the Diamond Cuts Barber Lounge. Friday, January the 15th. In Goose Creek at the Diamond Cuts Barber Lounge. And then the next day, the very next day, Saturday the 16th, I will be in Macon, Georgia for the first time. Saturday the 16th, I will be in Macon, Georgia for the first time. And I will be at the Homeland Village Cultural Center. The Homeland Village Cultural Center, 2910 Napier Avenue, Macon, Georgia. Very first time. Saturday, January the 16th, Homeland Village Cultural Center, 2910 Napier Avenue, 2 to 8. So those are the 4 stops for January. I'm working on the Black History Book Release Tour. For Black History, I want to give a 1-hour speech, message, Q&A before I start signing books. Okay, we will be in Newport News, Virginia for the first time in like 7 or 8 years. We will be in Newport News, Virginia in February. We will be in Louisville, Kentucky in February. We're looking at Las Vegas, Nevada for February. We're looking at Oakland, California for February. Baltimore, Maryland for February. Connecticut for February. Rhode Island for February. Please donate to the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. Let's finish the mission. Let's finish the mission. $ FDMG School. $ FDMG School. PayPal.me/FDMG Academy. PayPal.me/FDMG Academy. P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware. P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware, 19809. If you want to make a personal donation to Dr. Umar, not a school donation, but a personal donation to Dr. Umar, you can do that at $DrUmarJohnson, DrUMAR Johnson. You must spell the whole word because there is a fraudulent Dr. Umar account on Cash App. There's a fraudulent $FDMG account. You must make sure you're putting in the right information. For the school, it is $FDMG School. For Dr. Umar, it is $DrUMAR Johnson. You must have the entire name. Dr. Umar is a fraud page. So, let's get into today's message. I want to talk to Black parents and Black educators and Black advocates about the evolution of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I want to talk about the evolution of ADHD. This book that I'm holding right here, is the DSM-3. This is the old one. This book was published in 1987. This book was published by the American Psychiatric Association in 1987. This is the first time in this book that ADHD became known to the world. This book, DSM-3R, this is the first time in the history of American mental health that the diagnosis, the disorder, the mental illness, the disease of ADHD became known to the American public. 1987. This is the book. In 1980, DSM-2 gave us ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. But in 1987, when this blue book with the yellow letters came out, when this book in my hand was published in 1987, ADD had now become ADHD. My premise for today's seminar, and I'm only going to keep you for an hour. My premise for today's seminar is that ADHD is a fraud. ADHD does not exist. ADHD was created so the medical companies could get rich off single-parented Black alpha male children. ADHD was invented by the drug companies so that they could get rich on single-parented African-American alpha male children. And my second premise is that as each edition of the DSM came out, subsequent to the 1987 edition, it has increasingly become easier and easier. It has increasingly become easier and easier for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, counselors, doctors to diagnose our children with this disease, which cannot be proven to exist. So, let's look at the original definition of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Okay. So, page 49 of the DSM-3-TR 1987 American Psychiatric Association. It begins with disruptive behavior disorders. Disruptive behavior disorders. And it says this subclass of disorders is characterized by behavior that is socially disruptive and is often more distressing to others than to the people with the disorder. I want to repeat what I just said. I want to see if you have your thinking caps on, brothers and sisters. I want to repeat what I just said. Listen to this. This subclass of disorders is characterized by behavior that is socially disruptive and is more distressing to others than to the people with the disorder. Did you just hear what I just said? Did anybody pick up on the contradiction in what I just said? The very first sentence in the DSM-3 on disruptive behavior disorders. It just said that the person with the problem, your son, the person with the problem, your son, doesn't have a problem with being hyper or inattentive. It is the white teacher. It is the white teacher. It is the white teacher that has a problem with his energies levels. Do you understand? The black boy isn't hyper or inattentive. He has a natural level of God-given African energy. The black boy is not hyper or inattentive. He has a natural level of God-given African energy. This first sentence here just said that ADHD is not about helping your child. The first sentence just told you what this is all about. ADHD is not about helping your child. ADHD is about helping the white teacher who doesn't want to be bothered with your child. I just read it. ADHD is about helping the teacher who doesn't want to be bothered with your child. Let me read it again. This subclass of disorders is characterized by behavior that is socially disruptive and is often distressing to others, more distressing to others than to the people with the disorder. What have I always told you about child psychiatry and psychology? What have I always told you about child psychology and psychiatry? Children do not self-refer for medication. Children do not self-refer for evaluation. So if children do not self-refer for medication, and if children do not self-refer for an evaluation, what are they doing with evaluations and medications? If children don't go around asking to be tested, and if they don't go around asking to be drugged, who is doing this and why? Children are being medicated because the adults around them want them to be medicated. Children are being evaluated because the adults around them want them to be evaluated. not because anything is wrong with them, but because the adults don't want to be bothered with their natural energy levels. Let us continue. This subclass of disruptive behavior disorders includes ADHD, which is ain't no daddy at home disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder. Studies have indicated that in both clinical and community samples, the symptoms of these disorders co-vary to a high degree. What do they mean, brothers and sisters, when they say the symptoms of ADHD, conduct disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder co-vary? What do they mean when they say the symptoms of the three disruptive behavior disorders co-vary? It means that there is a lot of overlap. It means that there is a lot of overlap in the symptomatology that distinguishes between ADHD, conduct disorder, and ODD. Now, why do they co-vary? Why does ADHD, conduct disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder, why do they co-vary so much? The reason they co-vary so much is because they're really three faces of the same scam. The reason ADHD, conduct disorder, and ODD co-vary so much is because they're really three faces of the same scam. So the way that the American Psychiatric Association set this up with the drug companies is if we don't get them on ADHD, let's create something else where we can get them on conduct disorder. And if we can't get them on conduct disorder, let's create something else where we get them on oppositional defiant disorder. It's like when you go to court. You go to court and the prosecutor can't get you on one thing, so the prosecutor pulls up another law. And if the prosecutor can't get you on that law, then the prosecutor pulls you up on another law. They do the same thing to our children in mental health. They do the same thing to our children in mental health. They do the same thing to our children in mental health. ADHD, conduct disorder, and ODD are three faces of the same mental health scam. Now, this book was published in 1987. This book was published in 1987. Towards the end of the first decade of the mass incarceration of Black fathers. This book was published towards the end of the first decade of the mass incarceration of Black fathers, 1980. This book was published 7 years into the 1980s, the decade where the CIA, cocaine import agency, crack import agency, the CIA, brought dope into the Black community to neutralize the liberation struggle. Cocaine was brought into the Black community by the CIA to neutralize the Black liberation struggle. Cocaine was the great neutralizer of the Black community. They had to fight us in the 50s. They had to fight us in the 60s. They had to fight us in the 70s. In the 80s, they said, we're not dealing with this no more. We're going to flood the Black community with dope. We're going to turn the Negroes against each other. Everybody going to be using it or selling it. We're going to neutralize the Black power struggle once and for all. And you haven't had a major, serious struggle that can be measured with progressive gains. I'm not talking a bunch of speeches. You haven't had a true, serious political, economic struggle for Black people ever since the chemical war against the Black community. They neutralized us. They neutralized us. And what I want you all to understand is the same time that they dropped the crack off, they dropped the Ritalin off. Same decade they dropped the crack off, they dropped the Ritalin off. Same decade they started doping up our fathers and mothers. They started doping up our boys and girls. I'm giving you facts. I'm giving you the facts. Let us read. The symptoms of these disorders co-vary to a high degree. In the literature, the behaviors that these disorders encompass have been referred to as quote-unquote externalizing symptoms. Externalizing symptoms. Externalizing. Externalizing means other people see them as a problem. Externalizing. Other people see them as a problem. There's no black boy that has a problem with his energy level. Have you ever met a black boy in your life? Have you ever met a Afro-Latino, for the Latinos who identify as African? Because I'm only about Africans. I'm only about Africans. You have never met an African or African Latino boy who has ever said, I have too much energy. Who has ever heard one of our young princes? Who has ever heard one of our sons say, Mommy, I have too much energy. Daddy, I have too much energy. Can I have some drugs? Who has ever heard a child say that? You have never heard a child say that in your life, because no boy has a problem with the way God made him. None of our sons have an issue with the way that they were designed by universal technology. The universal technology of the African male child is there to represent and manifest the masculine principle of supreme consciousness. His energy is high because it mirrors the energy of the cosmos. His energy is high because it mirrors the energy of the galaxy. His energy is high because it mirrors the dark consciousness of the Creator's universe. This is why we're building the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. This is why we're building the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. This is why we must build and support all the independent African schools, real schools that exist. And this is why we must support our home schools as a temporary intervention. But in the long scheme of things, we need concrete, massive, intellectual insurrection academy. Not a school, an intellectual insurrection academy. Not a school, an intellectual insurrection academy. We have to crack the Caucasian consciousness that is suffocating the genius of the African psyche. We have to crack, tear away, break off the Caucasian consciousness that is suffocating the African genius. That's what we must do. That is what we must do. An intellectual insurrection academy. That is what we must build. Intellectual insurrection, and I am the leader of it. I am the Minister of Education for the African race. I am the Minister of Mental Health for African children globally. That is what I am. What they do to any of us, they do to all of us. It's the same thing in the UK. It's the same thing in South Africa. It's the same thing in the Caribbean islands. It's the same thing in Canada. It's the same thing in Australia. Yes, 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 yes. European mental health is now turning its attention to Caribbean African and continental African children to get rich. To get rich. $1 billion industry is what mental health is. $1 billion industry is what mental health is. Let me read some more. Wait a minute. I need an incense. All praises due to Olodumare. All praises due to Olodumare. All praises due to Chukwu. All praises due to Amin Ra. All praises due to Nyame. Get an incense. First day of Kwanzaa. Umoja, we need unity. 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 The purpose of the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy is to build a collective consciousness amongst the next generation of African alpha male children so they will automatically be unified. I say we are psychologically engineering our boys for a unification of liberation. We are psychologically engineering our boys for a unification of liberation. Ashe. Let us get back. ADHD. Let's read the first ever diagnosis for ADHD. I'm going to read it now. The first ever diagnosis for ADHD. If you like what you're hearing, make a donation to the school. $ FDMG School on your Cash App. PayPal.me/FDMG Academy on PayPal. If you like what you're hearing, make a donation to the school. $ FDMG School on your Cash App. PayPal.me/FDMG Academy. If you want to make a personal donation to the Prince of Pan-Africanism, you can make that to $ DrUmarJohnson. DrUMAR Johnson. Let us read the first ever diagnosis for ADHD. The essential features of this disorder are developmentally inappropriate degrees of inattention, impulsiveness, and hyperactivity. Inattention, impulsiveness, and hyperactivity. People with the disorder generally display some disturbance in each of these areas, but to varying degrees. Manifestations of the disorder usually appear in most situations, including at home, in school, at work, and in social situations, but to varying degrees. Some people, however, show signs of the disorder in only one setting, such as at home or at school. Stop. Stop right there. They just said that most people with ADHD show symptoms in different settings. They will show hyperactivity, impulsiveness, and inattention at home. They will show hyperactivity, impulsiveness, and inattention at school. They will show hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsive at football practice. They will show hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsiveness at the shopping mall, at the restaurant, at the after-school job. But then they come right back and says, some people, however, show signs of the disorder in only one setting. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. I'm showing you the contradictions, the lies. If I am only hyper at home, but I'm not hyper nowhere else. If I am only hyper in my classroom and I'm not hyper anywhere else. If I'm only hyper when I'm with my mom, but I'm never hyper with my dad. If I'm only hyper at church, but I'm never hyper at the community center. If I'm only hyper in one place, doesn't that indicate that the problem is not with me? The problem is with the place. The problem is where the behavior happens. The problem is with the setting. How can I only be hyper in one place? How can I only be hyper in one place? That's impossible. If you only hyper in one place, you don't have ADHD, because all behavior is a function of where it happens and the consequences that follow. All behavior is a function of where it happens and the consequences that follow. All behavior is a function of the environment. It's a function of the environment. So if your son is only hyper in one environment, if your son is only hyper in English class, but he's not hyper in science class, he's not hyper in math class, he's not hyper in history, he's only hyper in English, he don't have ADHD. There's something going on in that English class that we need to look at. Let's study the environment of the English class. Let's manipulate the variables in the English class. Let's create a behavior plan for the English class, brothers and sisters. I hope you parents are paying attention. Don't ever let nobody tell you your son has ADHD because he don't act right with one teacher. He has ADHD because he don't act right with one teacher. Then he don't have ADHD. For you to have a mental illness, symptoms should be universal, irregardless of context. For your son to have ADHD, his symptoms should be universal, irregardless of context. Let's keep going. Symptoms typically worsen in situations requiring sustained attention. Pay attention to this. Symptoms typically worsen in situations requiring sustained attention, such as listening to the teacher in the classroom, attending meetings, or doing class assignments or chores at home. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. Let's go back over this. Symptoms typically worsen in situations requiring sustained attention, such as listening to the teacher in the classroom. Stop. Can't you see how the diagnosis was tailored? Can't you see how the diagnosis was tailored to address the concerns of the white teacher who doesn't want to teach your son anyway? Can't you see? They specifically said, listening to the teacher in the classroom. What kind of teacher is in the classroom? What color of the teacher in the classroom? What temperament of the teacher in the classroom? What commitment does the teacher have in the classroom? What race is the teacher in the classroom? What kind of training did the teacher in the classroom have? Do you see this? They're saying the child has trouble listening to the teacher. But if the teacher don't listen to the child, if the teacher is boring, if the lesson plans are irrelevant, if the curriculum is trash, if the school is a failure, why are we considering ADHD for this child? Who's looking out for the best interest of the child? Who's looking out for the best interest of the child? And then it says, or doing class assignments or chores at home. Or doing class assignments or chores at home. So let me ask you a question. What child do you know in the world? What child do you know in the world who doesn't have a problem listening to the teacher or doing their chores at home? What child? When you were a child, didn't you have trouble listening to that boring teacher? Didn't you have trouble sitting through a class that was totally irrelevant? Didn't you have a problem during certain lessons that had nothing to do with you? Didn't you have trouble wanting to get your homework, doing your homework because you didn't want to do it? Isn't that every child? Isn't that every child? So why in 1987 does it become a mental illness? Why in 1987 does it become a mental illness? Why in 1987 does it become a mental illness? Is it so America could drug up black boys in order to keep their black mothers from demanding their husband's release from prison? Is it possible that they started diagnosing black boys with ADHD with this book in 1987 to keep their mothers from demanding their fathers back out of prison. They drugged the boys to keep the mothers quiet. They drugged the boys so the mothers wouldn't say, give him his father. The doctor replaced the daddy. The doctor replaced the daddy. The psychiatrist became the new POPA in the black community in 1987. Let's read the sentence one more time. Symptoms typically worsen in situations requiring sustained attention, such as listening to teachers in the classroom, attending meetings, or doing class assignments or chores at home. Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? Who is usually the teacher giving the instructions in the class, and who is usually the parent at home assigning the chores? What gender is the teacher and what gender is the parent? What gender is the teacher? What gender is the parent? What gender is the teacher? What gender is the parent? What gender is the teacher? What gender is the parent? The teacher is a white woman and the parent is a black woman. The teacher is a white woman and the parent is a black woman. The teacher is a white woman and the parent is a black woman. So let me ask you a question. Is it possible that the hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsiveness that the white teacher and the black mother sees, is it possible that the hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsiveness that the white female teacher sees and the black female mother sees is a reaction from the black male child from being suffocated with female energy? Is it a reaction from the black male child being suffocated with female energy? Is it a normal, natural reaction for the black male to push back against the home and school matriarchy? See, we have to talk about the home and school matriarchy. We don't spend enough time talking about the home and school matriarchy. Now, time out. Time out. I am not demonizing our mothers at all. I want to thank all black women out there for doing a good job raising their sons in the absence of their fathers in many cases. I am not demonizing the black mother at all. I'm simply saying that the black male is born into this world with a need for an equal amount of masculine and feminine nurture. He needs an equal amount of masculine and feminine nurture. He needs an equal amount of masculine and feminine nurture. That's all I'm saying. The black mother hasn't done anything wrong. I'm simply saying that after he deals with a white racist woman for 7 to 8 hours all day in school, after dealing with a white racist female for 7 or 8 hours all day at school, he comes home and he has to deal, in many cases, with an angry black mother. Not naturally angry, no. Angry because she can't find a good enough job to take care of her children. Angry because the white power structure locked up her husband. Angry because she's being blamed for everything that goes wrong in the black family. Angry because she got needs of her own and everybody is expecting her to be a superwoman. The black woman is not the culprit here. The black mother is not the culprit. I'm simply saying that the homeschool matriarchy, in the absence of any masculine energy, the homeschool matriarchy, in the absence of masculine energy, can be a very psychologically oppressive reality for the black male child. Do my mothers understand where I'm coming from? I'm not blaming you. Do my mothers understand where I'm coming from? I'm not blaming you. Do the mothers understand what I'm talking about? I'm not blaming you at all. Okay? I'm not blaming you, sisters. I'm simply saying your son is dealing with a woman at school, a woman at home. That's a homeschool matriarchy. His whole life is controlled by women from birth until he goes to jail. And that's when the Wharton takes over. Your son's life is controlled from birth until he goes to jail by women. The black man doesn't encounter a man until he gets in trouble with the law, goes to court, or goes to jail. The black male rarely encounters a man, a real man, until he gets locked up, goes to jail, sees the judge, or runs into the warden. The only time a black man, a black boy, the only time a black boy who doesn't have his father at home, the only time a black boy who doesn't have his father at home can get some real black male attention, the only time a black boy who doesn't have his father at home can get some real black male alpha attention is he got to be an athlete. If he don't play football or basketball, he's in trouble. If your son don't play football or basketball, he's in trouble. And I got a problem with that. Dr. Ifatunde has a problem with that. The Prince of Pan-Africanism has a problem with that. You mean to tell me that the only way black boys can get some black alpha male attention is he got to be a football player or a basketball player? That's sad. That is sad. That is sad. You mean to tell me we got a church on every corner? And in some hoods, we got two churches on every corner. We got a church on every corner. And in some hoods, we got two churches on every corner. And you mean to tell me that the only way a black boy can get some alpha male attention is if he plays football or basketball? That's a damn shame, and I blame black men for that. That's a damn shame, and I blame black men for that. That's a damn shame, and I blame black men for that. We see our sons being crushed under a homeschool matriarchy. We see our black sons being crushed under a homeschool matriarchy. And we're not going to do nothing about it unless he plays football or basketball. I'm telling you, this ADHD is nothing but ain't no daddy at home disorder. I'm telling you that ADHD ain't nothing but ain't no daddy at home disorder. I'm telling you that this is a scam and a fraud. It is nothing but the black male being hyper, inattentive, oppositional, and impulsive because he wants his father. He wants a man. That's all he wants. And we took the natural need of a black boy to want a father, and we turned it into a damn disease so the drug companies in Wall Street can get rich. These are the facts. Absolutely. Social engineering. Social engineering for self-destruction. Social engineering for self-destruction. Social engineering for self-destruction. Let me read a little more. And by the way, brothers and sisters, DrUmarJohnson will be in Rochester, New York, next Saturday, January the 2nd at Allah's Kitchen for the Black Parent Advocate book release. And my book is about as thick as this book. My book is as thick as this book. My book is as thick as this book. This is Rocky, and Black Parent Advocate is Apollo Creed. This is Rocky, and Black Parent Advocate is Apollo Creed. The DSM is Rocky, and Black Parent Advocate is Apollo Creed. My book is just as thick as this book. I'm ready for war. My book is just as thick as this book. I'm ready for war. Frederick Douglass City, Rochester, New York, Saturday, January the 2nd. Buffalo, New York, Sunday, January the 3rd. Charleston, South Carolina, Dr. King's birthday, Friday, January the 15th. Macon, Georgia for the first time. Macon, Georgia for the first time, Saturday, January the 16th. Let us continue. Signs of the disorder. I'm reading. Signs of the disorder may be minimal or absent when the person is receiving frequent reinforcement or very strict control, or is in a novel setting or a one-to-one situation. For example, being examined in the clinician's office or interacting with a video game. Did y'all just hear that? Y'all didn't just hear what I just read. I'm going to read it again. Did y'all hear what I just read? I'm going to read it again and break it down. I hope you heard the bull crap. I hope you heard the nonsense that I just read. Let me read it again. Signs of the disorder may be minimal or absent when the person is receiving frequent reinforcement or very strict control, or is in a novel setting or a one-to-one situation, such as being examined in a clinician's office or interacting with a video game. Can I ask you guys a question? If the disorder is absent, when the kid is receiving reinforcement, which is called behavioral management, if there are no symptoms of ADHD, when the child is receiving reinforcement, that's consequences and rewards. If there's no ADHD, when the child is receiving behavioral therapy, why do you have to diagnose them then? Why do you have to give them medicine? Why not continue? They just told you right in the words. They just told you that ADHD don't exist if the child is receiving appropriate consequences and rewards. Did y'all hear what I just read, brothers and sisters? Did y'all hear what I just read, brothers and sisters? They just admitted right here in the first book to use ADHD as a diagnosis. They admitted that if it doesn't show up when the child is getting consequences and rewards, because all children should get a reward and consequence system, it's called classroom management. It's called behavior management. It's called behavior therapy. They just said that you won't see the symptoms if they get reinforcement. So if you don't see ADHD when the child is getting reinforced, if you don't see ADHD when the child is getting reinforced, what do we need a diagnosis for? What do we need medication for? They just exposed the hypocrisy of the whole diagnosis in one sentence. They just exposed the hypocrisy of the whole diagnosis in one sentence. Let us continue. And let me say this. Brothers and sisters, the IRS is giving you guys a special $300 tax credit that you can use to donate to any nonprofit before the year is out. You can claim $300 as a donation on your tax return for 2020. If you don't believe me, go to the IRS webpage. You can claim a special one-time $300 donation to a tax-exempt organization on your taxes, and you don't have to itemize it. So I'm asking everybody who's watching this first day of Kwanzaa seminar on the evolution of ADHD to donate $300 to the school before New Year's Day. Go to PayPal, go to Cash App, or mail it in. Check or money order before January the 1st. Make sure the check or money order is before January the 1st. And mail it to the FDMG Academy. P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware. P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware, 19809. I would hate to oblige ignorance on such a beautiful day, but for the sake of clarity, I will. If there's anybody out there who can produce clear evidence that they donated to the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy, or what would become the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, or what was called the DR.UMAR School for Boys, if you can prove that you donated to this school effort before I collected my first donation in for St. Paul's when I was in St. Louis in the spring of 2014, please produce your evidence. I am tired of people lying, claiming that they donated to the school effort when I never accepted a single donation ever in my life before the St. Louis collection in 2014. All you have to do is prove your accusation. I'm here. Prove your accusation. You can't prove it because you know it's a lie. And because you hate and you're jealous and envious and you have a coon disorder and post-traumatic slavery disease, you want to destroy me because I'm doing better than you. We have a bad problem in the Black community when so many of our own want to destroy anybody who's doing better than them. It is sad that you can go on YouTube any day of the week and find 10 brand new DR.UMAR slander videos, all done by people who I am doing better than. If I'm doing better than you, it's not my fault. You could do better for yourself if you stop worrying about another man. We have a crisis of beta males stalking alpha males on YouTube. We have a crisis of beta males stalking alpha males on YouTube. We have a crisis of beta males stalking alpha males on YouTube. Let me get back to the seminar. We have 10 seconds on Instagram, and I'm going to restart Instagram. We have 10 seconds on Instagram. Facebook, stay